This is going to be a commentary piece on the status of the Ravens roster leading into training camp. I haven't necessarily done one of these in each offseason. This one I worked on for a considerable amount of time. Really, the idea for it came to me in the last 3 to 4 weeks or so when the Steelers really, I think, quite obviously upped their effort to try to match the Ravens' incredible offseason fortunes. If you ask me, I'll have some comments maybe on the Steelers front office bringing in Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and then followed by Jonnu Smith, Jalen Ramsey. Really the weirdest trade that I think we've seen in a long time. I probably have a different opinion, to be honest with you, than most of you in how things have worked out for the Steelers and potentially what it could look like in 2025. I think there's really two hinge points for that team. But this video is really about what I think is the unique blessings or fortune for the Ravens that they've experienced leading up to 2025, and how, regardless of how lucky you want to call it for Eric Decosta to be able to draft Mike Green, sign DeAndre Hopkins, and then also sign Jair Alexander as a free agent, EDC in the front office, they had to be willing to do those things, right? They had to be willing to take those steps and take advantage of it. Those were three massive talent upgrades, if you ask me. Talking about Mike Green being our third or fourth or fifth or whatever you want to call it, best outside linebacker in terms of snap counts. I think those things are going to ebb and flow during the season. Whatever the situation calls, whether it calls for run stoppers like Tavius Robinson or whether it calls for guys to get to the quarterback or be multiple like Kyle Van Noy. These were, and then also DeAndre Hopkins, essentially dropping Nelson Aguilar, adding DeAndre Hopkins, is an immense upgrade at receiver, regardless of where you want to rank them. I don't really prefer to rank players from across the NFL number one, or even within our team. I think they'll be utilized in different locations depending on the matchups. And then finally, Jair Alexander. To add him to a group that already had three starting caliber outside corners with Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, and then Chibodi Awuzie. This is an incredible roster that has been able to put together through some good luck, fortune, blessings, if you will. It's just been boosted, if you ask me, by having so much continuity on the offensive side with players returning and Todd Monken being signed long term for the Baltimore offense. I do think it has to be said, or at least covered, that high caliber players now want to be in Baltimore on the offensive side, right? Because of that consistency with Monken returning for his third year, the team always contending or at least having an opportunity to play deep in the playoffs. The coaching staff continuity, second year for Zach or third year for Todd Monken, John Harbaugh being here a long time, but the reality is I think it's the opportunity to play with Lamar Jackson. It's the opportunity to be on the same side as Lamar Jackson and benefit from the way he shares the football, right? I see a real direct link here for at least one of our signings, actually two. It's not coincidental for me that Derrick Henry signed on March 14th of 2024, and 1 year later, exactly, literally the same day, 2025, however, March 14th, is when DeAndre Hopkins signed. Lamar has a huge impact on the field. It's underrated, if you ask me, what it probably looks like to other players around the league to see Todd Monken's offense flowing, sharing the ball among so many talented guys. That Hopkins signing, I think, would quite obviously be the first blessing, a 1 year deal, which is at minimum a huge upgrade over Aguilar, like I covered already. I think he offers more to the Ravens offense than that, to be real, especially in this offense, which can be so boundary side focused at times. The options, for lack of a better word, that Monken and Lamar have to target in some of these high leverage third down and red zone situations, I think could possibly just make this team even more efficient offensively, which doesn't seem like it's possible based upon some of the advanced metrics from 2024. 6 weeks later, the Ravens, kind of apparently shrugged off some trade offers on draft night, on the first round at least, to get Malachi Starks, very talented, accomplished safety from Georgia. That one was pretty much expected, right? That Baltimore would get a high caliber player late in the first round. What was shocking, obviously, was the next evening or the next day, when EDC was able to get another first round talent at pick 59, and that's obviously Mike Green. There's some question marks about all of the second round players. When will they be available? Actually, if they will be available at all in 2025. But let's just assume that at some point Mike Green will be. Those three acquisitions from Hopkins, the Starks, and then Green, it kind of just reminds me of like a party or a family gathering where at some point the volume gets turned up, right? It's gradual at first, 1 p.m., 2 p.m., and then sometime around 6:30 or 7, whenever it starts to get dark, the volume starts to go up and things just start to get louder. And that to me is that it was that point in time. That 2-day turnaround, 24 hours, less than 24 hours in fact, Starks to Green added to the roster in a way that I think is incredibly rare or unique across the NFL. Some other teams had 2 second round picks, Houston and Cleveland Browns, in fact, being one of them, which is what becomes interesting for them to have been the two teams that signed guaranteed deals for their second rounders. They now have another second rounder each to deal with in terms of trying to get them in training camp on time to have an impact. And then finally, the Ravens being able to grab Jair Alexander. For a free agent signing at 4 million, a guy with that type of talent, it's when you think about the last two guys, right? Mike Green and Jair Alexander. No one would have predicted that they would be on this Ravens roster after the first night of the draft. Well, I guess at that point you knew that Green was falling. Let's do it this way: before the first round of the draft occurs, what are the chances at that point in time of both Mike Green and Jair Alexander ending up on the Baltimore Ravens roster for 2025? It just didn't seem possible at that point in time. I know that apparently it's come out that the Ravens tried to acquire Jair Alexander in the middle of the 2024 season. That makes total sense to me given what we were seeing on the field from Brandon Stevens compared to the year before. For them to be the fourth and fifth players signed in this chronological order, I guess, I think it's pretty amazing because they're both obviously starter caliber players. Green being a first round talent and Alexander having, the career accolades that he has, deservedly so, even though he's missed so much time in the last 2 seasons. I did put out multiple videos on Alexander. If you're willing to, or if you haven't checked them out already, one of which was focused on his talent, which I think is quite unique as a cover two corner, especially into the boundary. That one was clearly the least likely signing, right? Alexander, um, just prior to the draft. Once he's released, of course, then all bets are off. I think the Ravens, to be able to get Henry a year ago at such a incredibly low salary, have benefited from the collection of talent as players and the coaching staff at this point, with Chuck Pagano returning on the defensive side, Munkin coming back for his third year, um, along with Mike Green, the Jair Alexander acquisition, being a guy that's so totally dangerous at corner, great ball skills, no matter which, I guess, guy they put on the field at corner. I do have some theories about who's going to be on the field depending on the right hash and left hash and where the ball is located for the yard line, meaning on the other team side of the 50, what I usually refer to as the -1 to the -45, -49, excuse me, or on our side as it gets closer to the red zone. I think that Jair being very connected to Lamar, or vice versa from their time at Louisville, makes it more likely once he gets released. If you rewind back to even before the Henry signing on March 14th of 2024, we are now in a place, I think, from a roster standpoint that we really could not have predicted. Adding Henry, adding Hopkins, drafting Starks who was mocked to us so much. That's understandably a higher percent opportunity. Hopkins moving on from the Chiefs to Baltimore, Green falling to the second round, and then Alexander being a free agent acquisition for an incredibly low salary point. That's the impetus for this video, that all of those things occurring chronologically are extremely low percent possibilities. I think it's pretty obvious that Alexander would have been an instant talent boost, right, for the Ravens secondary in 2024, no matter when they were attempting to acquire him. I haven't seen the dates associated with it or linked to it. You're more than welcome to let me know in the comment section if there were actual dates or weeks when the Ravens inquired. My assumption would be that it would be in the first 5 to 6 weeks of the season when our passing defense was struggling so much. And my guess is that kind of coincides with a point in time in the 2024 season where Brandon Stevens started to spend more time as a dime linebacker in some third down moments, some obvious passing situations, I guess. Basically, we would have Marlon on the field along with White, and then Wiggins on the other side, and Stevens would kind of move to that dime linebacker. At the time, I thought it was to maybe account for some of the inconsistencies we saw with Trenton Simpson. It appears to me, or I guess I'm offering some conjecture, that maybe that was one of the factors, but another one was that the Ravens recognized we were having real difficulty matching up with back shoulder throws or one-on-one plays against Brandon Stevens, particularly into the boundary. That timeline might not work out perfect. I don't know exactly when the deadline occurred and what week, I can't recall. But for me, and for the seeing Stevens all of a sudden show up used as a dime linebacker, kind of lines up with Wiggins being integrated totally into the defense, us bringing in Tre'Davious White and appearing to have more trust in him, and I guess the failed attempt to acquire Jair Alexander. I do want to talk about one position group specifically here in a moment, but overall, I don't know about you, I'm kind of blown away by the overall talent now that we get a look at it prior to going into training camp. First of all, because this is a poor phrase, there's a consistent ceiling or maybe reliably high ceiling and floor for so many of the players that we acquired. Basically, Starks, Hopkins, Alexander, Green. We know those guys can all play, but in specific, to be specific, Hopkins and Alexander, right? You've got film of them at a given position, which was already a strength. It was already strong for the Ravens, outside corner and then wide receiver. It's only been strengthened even more. We're we have filthy depth at those spots, if you ask me. It's a rare group at corner, right? With now Humphrey, Wiggins, Awuzie, and then Alexander. Also, I'm super excited to see TJ Tampa, right? The preseason is going to be a great opportunity, I think, to get a look at him, what he's capable of doing against that level talent, right? Second and third string guys. But wide receiver, to have Bateman, Flowers, and Hopkins together, it'll be a different order every week, probably in terms of targets, right? I think it'll all come down to what Lamar sees out on the field and what him and Munkin have come up with during the week in terms of matchups and situations based on personnel and who they can take advantage of. But the fourth and fifth guy in those orders is Tylan Wallace, who was incredibly high percent player last year. I think 18 catches on 24 targets. I could be wrong. Maybe it was even less targets than that. Devontae Walker being a second year guy who hopefully can get some opportunities, but again, super interested to see what shakes down for him in the preseason. The position that I'm most interested in who gets opportunities and when is outside linebacker. I think that is the spot on this roster that, assuming once again that Mike Green eventually does sign and get on the field for the preseason and the regular season, because things do look different if he's not available at all for 2025. This spot, I think, is the one that pushes the roster to the top of the NFL. It's a very unique group to have this much talent, and I guess the only drawback, maybe there's two. The large one is you have some expiring contracts in Van Noy after this year and Owe. Tavius Robinson, I think, has two more seasons as a fourth round draft pick. I actually did a video on T Rob a couple of weeks ago. If you want to check it out, I'll try to link it up here at this time and also in the description. Drafting Mike Green makes so much sense given that two of those guys are on expiring deals, Van Noy and Owe. So is Ojabo. In fact, we drafted Adisa Isaac last year. He'll be finishing his second season after 2025. It's a very diverse group, in my opinion. If the Let me offer you this: if the Van Noy story keeps rolling, right? Like, first of all, it will deserve a ton of attention nationally and examination. He's a truly great football player, and if Baltimore is able to win a Super Bowl in 2025, that will be the fourth time that Kyle Van Noy is on a Super Bowl winning team. He's been a starter, serious contributor for two of the Patriots Super Bowl wins. The 2012 season when they defeated the Seattle Seahawks, he actually didn't get on the field in that game. But in any case, he's got three Super Bowl rings. He would have a fourth if the Ravens are able to claim one in 2025. I think his story at that time, if he's able to give the same production, becomes one that's incredibly unique across all of NFL history, for real. Someone who's able to come back and have so much impact. 22 and a half sacks the last two seasons. The only problem, or the second problem with this group, is who plays in the preseason, right? I don't know about you. I don't need to see Tavius Robinson play a lot in the preseason. We know what he can do, what he's capable of. Ojabo, you would want to see him get snaps out there with Isaac and I guess Mike Green as a rookie. I'm not sure what the Ravens front office or coaching staff, I guess, really thinks. I could go back and forth on Mike Green even playing on the field. I guess they would want to get him acclimated to the speed of the game and the decisions that he'll have to make. And so, from that standpoint, I get it. You're welcome to let me know what you think in terms of Mike Green in the preseason, if in fact he is available and around, if he gets finally signed contractually. How much you'd like to see him play in the preseason for to have two 100% starters, Van Noy and Owe, along with T. Rob and Mike Green, two guys who I think would also start for another 16, 18 teams across the NFL. Very unique situation. The only other position I think where the Ravens are so filthy rich, besides tight end, is running back with Henry and Justice Hill, along with Keaton Mitchell. I mean, what if Keaton Mitchell returns to his 2023 impact? Overall, I think you've just got to give a ton of credit for all the people who come together to create a roster like this. Do I have issues, complaints? I certainly do. Right? It's offensive line. That's the one. Will we be efficient and absolutely unstoppable on offense at times? Absolutely. I don't think this offensive line will prevent us from being a great offense. I think even better offensive line was possible with some of the picks that occurred in the third, fourth, and even fifth round, where I really think we kind of went AWOL from a front office standpoint. But overall, the talent is here across the board. It's really not even close to talk about the interior offensive line compared with the rest of the roster, specifically guard, right? It is an extreme relative weakness in my view. And when I say relative, what I mean is if you were to provide numbers from 0 to 100 for each position group, certainly guard would be the lowest ranked on this entire roster. But overall, nobody really has it better than us as Ravens fans to root for a roster that's got this much talent and this much depth, at least as it stands right now, right before training camp even starts. When there's no injuries, we're going to have an unprecedented amount of offensive talent, in my opinion. And I guess really we'll need that, right? Since it's a tough schedule. But this roster, this coaching staff is in position to not just handle it, but I think thrive, deal with it, and then thrive throughout it, and win the tough games in the playoffs. I do think that's available to them, whether they get it done or not. Turnovers and allowing big plays sometimes on defense. I do want to mention the return of Chuck Pagano being one of the things that, in my opinion, makes this offseason really, an A plus, even though from a draft standpoint, I think we're really top heavy with this draft. If Emory Jones isn't able to come back and provide anything for 2025, this draft still looks really good. But I don't think it looks like an A plus draft, even though we got two first round talents in Starks and Mike Green. Pagano and the safety coach from the Chiefs coming over, that to me really is what boosts up this entire offseason. Um, Coaching the DBs clearly needed to be improved and upgraded, right? We've upgraded the talent significantly. Awuzie, Alexander, Starks, losing Ardarius Washington is a big blow. I do wish he could be a part of this season because he's so sharp, so smart, and he looks to be a guy who just shows up at the football. But it probably means that Marlon Humphrey will be on the field at nickel more, which isn't a bad thing in my opinion. I would selfishly like to see Kyle Hamilton be able to play that nickel corner position because he's just so tremendous at it. All of this roster boosting, doesn't mean anything come playoff time, right? It really doesn't mean anything once we get to week one and have to deal with the Buffalo Bills on the road. But the incredible depth that's been built is as good as it gets to me. It provides insurance in the event of injury, options to the coaching staff for players missing time and or creating significant matchups when we go against teams that just don't have the depth that we do. It's a uniquely talented roster. I think it may be as complete as any in Ravens franchise history when taking into consideration these three things. Getting Hopkins, Green, and Alexander for the low price points that we did, truly remarkable. Having Chuck Pagano return to help Zach Orr with the back end, the secondary portion of it, as well as the chief safety coach. We have to assume that he can coach at a high level, all of the things he's been involved with Steve Spagnuolo and the Kansas City Chiefs during their run. And then Monken's return and Lamar's continuity. He's really at the height of his powers, if you ask me. I don't really have much comment on the whole top 10 quarterback ranking I don't get into those conversations nor really care about them because I think that it's everything is so segmented or divided up, I should say, with fan bases in the NFL. Nobody wants to give quarterbacks or players from opposing teams credit until, of course, that player signs with their team, which causes it all to really be exposed as hypocritical. In my opinion, if I had one game to win, I would want Lamar Jackson to be my quarterback, and it's pretty much where I've stood since 2019. And I decided to go full time on making videos like these. If you enjoyed this one, please let me know in the comment section, number one. If you didn't, because it didn't involve any film, feel free to let me know as well. But if you think other Ravens fans might enjoy listening to some of my thoughts about the roster and how the Ravens really cooked up a unique, historic offseason with Eric Decosta at the forefront of it, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.